right, we're getting ready to go live now, guys.
Copy that.
And then I'll share it out. So it takes a few seconds.
I'm just trying to find a comfortable place to sit where I have to sit in our front living room because my wife is on the phone in the other one. So.
Well, we are live now, but don't worry, there's no one in the room yet. So stand by.
Now's the time to pass
What I'm going to do is, before we get started, because this gives us a chance for people to come in, I'm just going to share the video out. So just give me a second because we are live. Hold on 1 second. Always takes us a second to set up. Hold on. All right, so I got the live link. So let me just share the live link out, guys, real quick. And then we'll get started. I'm going to share the live link up to all the groups. So how was your day, guys?
Can't complain. I was off.
Oh, lucky you. I was actually off today too, so lucky me.
Yeah.
I'm off every day now, so.
Yeah, you're retired.
Well, I am too. Technically.
So I'm just sharing it to the different groups, so bear with me and then we'll get started. I don't know if people are coming in yet, but you just gotta bear with me, guys. I want to make sure I share it to all the groups. Get a little bit more traffic. Hold on, one more. Let's see. Okay. All right, so we're pretty much good. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I'm going to get the video, so make sure we don't have any volume on our thing because it'll be delayed. All right, so we're starting to get people in now. All right, by the way, real quick, first comment I got, and then we'll introduce ourselves to everyone, is Tommy Arzate said, don't know this podcast. I guess he just found out about the podcast today, but he's happy to say that he joined the ranks of the CDCR. Oh, he'll be joining the ranks of the CDCR in the next few months.
Well, right on, Tommy. I'm had nearly 27 years in the CDCR. It's a great organization. It has some problems, but it blazes the trail for America.
And then I got some people saying glad that they're off today, so they're able to watch this. So the room is starting to fill up now. So why don't we do this, guys? Why don't we introduce ourselves first? So I'll go first. There you go. My name is Anthony Ganji, host of Tier Talk. Got about 17, 18 years in the business. Love what I do. Have a great channel that promotes what we do for either recognition. If you need information, you want to be educated, training, whatever it is, it's a channel that's really dedicated to the brave men and women that work in the field of corrections. What do you got, Russ? A little bit about you.
A little bit about me. I have 27 years in with California Department of Corrections, about another 3 in with a juvenile detention facility. I've been happy to say a part of Cheer Talk now for a while under the tutelage of my mentor there, Anthony Ganji. And you know, I'm dedicated to this business and trying to help any officer along, but especially the younger ones that are up and coming.
And Keith Hellwig.
All right, I'm Keith Helwig. I had 36 years in the Department of Corrections in Wisconsin. I retired as a captain. For 23 of those 36 years, I also worked as a police officer for different agencies. At one point, I worked full-time for the Sheriff's Department. I've written a couple books on corrections. I have a YouTube channel called Cops Corrections, which I discuss, sometimes I discuss the similarities between the two, the differences between the two, sometimes just training. As with Anthony and Russ, one of my goals is just to continue to educate people and continue to enhance the professionalism of correction.
Okay, so I'm going to try a different format real quick where when the person speaks, the camera goes on them. We'll see if that works. I hope it works. I'm going to test it out right now. Let's see. Oh, yes, it does. It does work because I'm watching myself on YouTube. So it does work. Okay, so guys, this is just going to be a Q&A. We're going to look to maybe do about an hour to answer some of your questions. So feel free to keep the questions coming. The first question right now that comes our way comes from Thorfinn Gaming. Me and Russ are very familiar with him. and they say, do you think COs should have less than lethal options? I can understand why not lethal. It's me with 60 inmates and all I have is a radio and not even cuffs. Now, here's the cool thing. Me and Russ are actually working on a show that's going to be discussing, and this is going to be done professionally, what all officers should have on their person: protective equipment, equipment they need to de-escalate. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to a state like, let's say, California, where they got pretty good equipment that they give out to their officers. And then we're going to go to maybe a state that doesn't have that type of equipment. And we're going to compare and contrast, which means that we're going to see why, let's say, that state, California, gives out this equipment. We're going to see the type of training they get, again, why that equipment is needed, and then go back to the states that don't give out that equipment and say, hey, why aren't you giving this out? And then also have our bullets as to why that equipment should be given out. So Russ, if you want to go first, we're talking about states, Russ, that really don't have that type of equipment on their duty belt. So what do you think an officer walking a unit every day should have on their person?
Well, I'm obviously very predisposed to the California model. The reason that California did what it did, and if anyone here saw my interview with Rob Sharkey and the way he helped develop California's alarm response training, you know that when you carry enough equipment, every single officer becomes a force multiplier. So the thing that I carried was, of course, I had handcuffs and a radio and a vest, but then in addition to that, we had an expandable baton, at the very least, one MK9. That's 9 ounces of OC that you've got right there. And then in addition to that, we would carry multiple chemical grenades. And by having all that stuff, you get 2 or 3 guys together and you've already got the party to take the riot down when you're at that point. And so I think when Thorfinn Gaming brings this up here, I was so glad to see that, because we're gonna do this video on this very subject, and we are gonna challenge those departments that don't have enough equipment and enough training to be in there and getting that stuff. We're going to be asking that question, why not?
Hey, Keith, what's your thoughts on what an officer, you were a captain, Keith, so what's your thoughts on what you feel an officer should have on their person when, doing their routine job?
Well, Wisconsin has finally gotten around to modernizing somewhat. Each officer is trained and issued OC to carry on their belt with them. They also carry cuffs and a radio. As far as other equipment, gloves, I think, are a necessity. A flashlight, you do need personal protective equipment. Now, I know some states, all the officers carry tasers. In Wisconsin, the supervisors carry tasers. Supervisor is called to each critical incident, so a taser is there. We also have an on-grounds armory in our facilities, which is in a secure place. It doesn't contain any lethal munitions at all. It contains pepper ball guns, it contains Tecto jets, things of that nature. But as far as each individual officer, they are trained in OC. They had to go through exposure themselves, which is pretty miserable for anybody who's been through it. So they know what it does, they know how effective it is, and they're able to use it. I think at the very least, an officer should have OC, access to handcuffs, and a radio.
And if I may add something on that, thanks, Keith, for answering the question. If I may add something, I also think I would prefer officers have 2 methods of restraints, because most of the time we break up fights, it's more than 1 inmate, there's 2. And also, if by chance their OC has to get deployed, they should be able to switch it with a new one, go right back to training and get a new one. This way they always know what they have in their can. I know I was reading something today where they don't do that, and I think that's totally unacceptable. Once an officer deploys that OC, they should be able to go back to training and get a whole new can filled. And again, a lot of agencies should be doing that if they give the officers OC, and you should be giving the officers OC. Remember, guys, if you're on the outside looking in, the tools you give to the officers give them the ability to up at a level so they can bring it back down and de-escalate. If not, it's just going to be fist for fist. You can't match the level of force. You have to go 1 step higher. And for those departments that like to punish all for the actions of one, which means that, okay, one officer used his OC wrong. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it away from everyone. Shame on you, because you just left your facility totally vulnerable. Now, the next question is a great question. It comes from, let's see, hold on, because we got some good questions coming in. We have about, just real quick, I'll tell you how many people we have sitting in the room right now with us. We have 19, so that's pretty good. It's good time, good amount. So the next question I got comes from Raul Ivan. He says, do you need to have experience to be a correctional officer? So how would you answer that, Keith?
You know what? When I came in, I had no experience as a correctional officer. I came out of school with a degree in criminal justice. I'd never worked in a prison. I hadn't intended on working in a prison. I intended to be a police officer. You know, saying that you have experience when you come into a prison, how do you get that experience unless you've already worked at a prison? You know, it's not something you can just pick up on the streets. If you're going to know how to deal with inmates, how to manage inmates, you're going to know policies and procedures. So yeah, it is. Every officer that comes in virtually ignorant about what's going on. You know, they watch TV, they watch Orange is the New Black, they watch all that other BS like that. That absolutely gives them no clue as to the reality of what's going on in the prison. So when you come into a prison, I know in Wisconsin, it's a shorter course. It's only a 6 or 7 week course that they have now at their training academy. But generally, then when you get to the institution, you're going to have 3 weeks on the job training, and you're going to be working with seasoned officers. You're going to learn things from them. You're going to learn from the good officers. You're going to learn from the bad officers. Coming in with experience, it's great. It's great, but I know I did it for 36 years, and I went into that prison without a days of experience. So.
And if I may compliment what Keith is saying, that's sort of why we have a channel like Tier Talk, because Tier Talk provides us with an environment with those who walk the walk, experienced people who have a lot to offer, experienced people that are still in the field, experienced people that retired. So this is a good way to get an understanding of the profession, but you also have to know, and you have to be honest with yourself, is this a profession that you can do? Because again, this isn't a profession for just anyone. So again, a good sense of self, knowing what you're able to do, can really carry yourself a long way, because the last thing you want to do is find out when something major hits the fan, because then you're leaving yourself vulnerable, your partner vulnerable, the facility vulnerable. Hey, Russ, what's your thought about experience?
Well, you know, everyone's got to start somewhere. And so, you know, just for if you're looking for a career where you can start out knowing nothing and go straight to the academy, at least that was the model that was followed when I did it in California. I mean, it's a great opportunity. It took me 18 months to get my position, and then I went straight to the academy, and then spent 6 weeks in the academy training, and then ended up going directly to San Quentin State Prison. Now you get quite a bit more training before that happens. Now I think California is right at 12 weeks. We were at 16. But they pared it back a little bit. So I think the 12 weeks is the mark that they're at right now, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and guys, the training in the academy is a great foundation. It kind of gives you information to kind of have a baseline, but you have experienced officers that you're going to be working with. So at all times, listen to what they have to say and then try to apply that information to that baseline. But most of my experience coming into the profession was me allowing myself to learn from the experienced officers and really get an understanding of why we do what we do. So if you get a chance to partner with a senior officer, take whatever you can from them, especially if they're willing to give you that knowledge, because that's what made me better. And then also always be willing to learn. You don't know everything. I don't care how high you move up or how long you have in the position. There's always someone or a situation, whatever the case may be, that you can learn from. So technically, corrections is sort of a job where you're going to have to get the experience once you go into the door. So the only advice I would have at that point is know yourself and know if this is a job that you can handle, and listen to platforms like this. Go to pages like Keepers of Chaos, Correctional Officer Brotherhood. Check out Keith Helwig's YouTube channel, Cops and Corrections. We're giving you a good understanding of this profession, some good knowledge from experienced individuals. Draw from that knowledge and see if this is something that you can actually do. Again, you know yourself best. That's the key. I know you guys see me looking down, but I'm reading the comments as I'm looking down. So don't think I'm ignoring you. I'm trying to get to all the questions. So here's the next question, and I'll go to Russ first. Hold on, because we get a lot of comments coming in. So what happens here is I lose the question that I'm on because it keeps moving. We have about 20 people in the room right now, guys. And someone just said, Thorfinn Gaming said, Tier Talk, your videos have helped me out tremendously. I also had an amazing field training officer 2 to 3 weeks. And I believe now he's saying he's an FTO. And that's great. I'm going to tell you something, guys. Our FTOs, they're so important to us. You have to have people that want to train individuals, because if you don't, they don't need to be in an FTO position, because they're the ones that have to tell people the importance of the job, the importance of what people do, but let people appreciate it. If you have a real crappy FTO and you have someone that wants to be in this profession, that FTO could hit that person negatively. And next thing you know, you have someone that becomes disenfranchised right from day one. Okay, so the next question is from Leroy Petaway. As a new CO, what's the most important thing to know? What's your thoughts, Russ?
There is so much to this to try and narrow it down. I think would just about be impossible. But if I was going to narrow it down to one thing, this is what I would say: is that you need to know how to develop your knowledge and your skill sets. If you can do that, you can become a great correctional officer. And the only way to really do that I've ever found is you have to find the people that are the subject matter experts in each field, whether it's handcuffing or use of force or gangs or report writing or contraband interdiction or searches or firearms or whatever. Find those people that are experts in their own little niche category, and then become an expert yourself in as many of those things as you can. So what I'm trying to say is if you can develop yourself and give yourself knowledge and give yourself training, that's the most important thing that you can do with regards to becoming a good, solid correctional officer.
I agree, Russ. And before we go to Keith, I want to mention something. I had a good conversation with someone that I highly admire. And I said, corrections has so many different roles that can be played here that there's a niche for everyone. There's a home for everyone. You can find your potential almost anywhere in corrections. So when you come into this field, keep your eyesights open to everything. Look at everything. Look at the left. Look at the right. See what this field really has to offer. And you really want to learn that on the front line, because even me, as I moved up to the administrative level, I took advantage of everything I learned at the front line, because that's key. That's the time. That's when you need to learn. And then when you go up, you have that great base. You know exactly what the front line's dealing with. You know exactly how to solve issues, and you wind up being 10 times more effective, trust me, if you're willing to learn as much as you can from when you enter that field, the moment you enter that field. And again, I just want to tell people that because corrections is such a big field, such a lot of moving parts, be willing to look at everything and then decide, once you know what the profession's about, decide what it is that you want to be. Don't go in so myopic and say, hey, I want to be this in 10 years. I want to be this in 5 years. Go into the profession, see what it's about, and then make a judgment call when you're more informed. Because right now I have a feeling that people, they strive to be one thing, and then unfortunately it may not work out and they become disenfranchised, not realizing that, hey, guess what, guys? There's a lot more to this field than just that one thing. So keep your eyes open, and if need be, have an alternate plan. But remember, this is a career, not a job. So when you're in this profession, look to have an impact, look to move up. And I'm telling you something, this profession can be very, very rewarding. Keith, what's your thoughts on something good that a new officer should have?
I think one thing that's essential for every new officer's success is to have a go-to guy. Find an individual during the course of your training that you know that you can trust, that you know is going to give you good advice, that's not going to steer you wrong. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't come out of the academy thinking because you spend all these weeks learning policies and procedures and the rule book and everything else, that you actually know your butt from your elbow. You need to get there and you need to talk with experienced staff. The one piece of advice I always gave new officers as well was make no your favorite word. If an inmate approaches you and asks you if, can I take a shower? And you're not sure if it's shower time or whatever, tell them no. I'll check into it. Check into it, and if they can take a shower, let them take a shower. But if you tell them yes, and it's not shower time or it's not rec time or whatever, you're going to have one heck of a time turning that yes into a no. So say no. Say no. Inmates are going to respect you a little more by saying no and looking into it and getting back to them than they are if you just give away the farm because you're not positive. Make sure that you know what you're supposed to be doing, what you're supposed to be giving the inmates. Another thing I always advise people to, now I worked as in Wisconsin, we call them blue shirt. I worked as a blue shirt for 17 years. I worked housing units, I worked patrol jobs, I worked towers. I did just a little bit of everything. Rely on your supervisors. Some supervisors are good supervisors. Admittedly, some supervisors you don't want to go to because they're headhunters or whatever. But rely on your supervisors. If you have a good captain or a good lieutenant, or in some states, sergeants or supervisors, a good sergeant that you can go to and you can trust them. Go to them if you have a situation. Go to them if you have a question. I never put anybody down for asking me any question. There's that old axiom that there are no stupid questions. Well, believe me, there are some stupid questions, but ask them anyways, because I'd rather have somebody asking me a stupid question than make a stupid mistake.
And Keith, you're 100% correct. I think this is a profession right now where corrections has always been a profession where you can't let the person sink. So if you have a question, you have to allow that person to ask that question. Because I'd rather, like Russ said, ask me the question, or I'm sorry, like Keith said, ask me the question. Let's get the answer out there, because God forbid it is a question that you really need to know, and you're afraid to ask it. Now what's going to happen is you don't have the answer to be effective, and God knows the risk that's going to, what can happen if you don't actually know what needs to be done to run a unit or just do your job effectively. I also want to say, for people that are new to the profession, communication's key. Give respect to get respect. Simple answers. Be firm, fair, and consistent. That's pretty much the model for corrections for, obviously, a lot of reasons. But I also want to mention that I like what Keith said about saying no. If you don't know, say no, and don't be hesitant. Inmates like to test inmates like to test how you validate your answer, how you justify the answer. So when you say no, the no has to come from you. It can't come from any other reason. Like, I'm saying no because the sergeant here today doesn't like us doing that. That's a weak no. That's a horrible no. The no should be something like, I'm saying no. Why? Because I'm saying no. And that's it. It ends the conversation, doesn't give the inmate a chance to come back the next day when the sergeant's not there. The key is that the no, or whatever your reasoning is, has to come from you. This way they know that you're setting the tone, because they will test your reasoning. And if your reasoning is weak, they will manipulate your reasoning. So stay strong with whatever it is that you need to provide, whether it's a directive, a reply, it has to come from you. Now, Keith, this question goes to you first. This comes from Mark Morgan. He says, I'm 50 years old and starting a new career in corrections in 2 weeks for, it looks like, the North Carolina Department of Corrections or Public Safety. What advice can you give me? Now, real quick, it's never too late to be in this profession as long as you're healthy and you could do the job. And I'm sure, hopefully, you have a good training, a way that they can actually filter if you're able to do the job or not. But I also want to say congratulations and welcome to the field, Mark. Okay, Keith, what's your advice on someone entering the field at 50 years old?
Don't let age be a barrier to you. I had an officer that worked for me who started out at age 60, and he turned out to be a great officer. Now, I'm 64 years old, and I still work as a police officer today. If you can do the job and earn the respect of others, you're going to do a great job. One of the things that you have going in your favor right now that a lot of people don't, particularly if they're fresh out of college or whatever, are the life experiences that you had by the age of 50. You've had life experiences that these people can only talk about. Now, inmates recognize that. We used to joke around at the last institution I was at. I had a first responder, his name was Harry. Harry was, probably 3 or 4 years younger than me. Another guy was named Nathan. Nathan was a couple years older than me, and they called us the gray team. I'd send my lieutenant down to solve a situation, and he'd be down there talking, and he was a great lieutenant. Dave was a great lieutenant. He was a younger guy. Well, when Harry, Nathan, and I got on the scene and I would start talking to them, a lot of times I think that they respected us more because of our age. They respected us more because of our life experiences. Now, they're going to know that you're a rookie. They're going to test you just like they do every other rookie. But I think along with age comes wisdom, and you're going to be able to withstand those tests a little better than a lot of the younger guys are. So, you know, congratulations on the job. Congratulations on starting a new profession. You know, I hope you like it. You know, and if you have any questions, you can always contact Anthony. You can contact Russ. You can contact me. There's so many sources out there that you can contact for questions that are more than willing to help you out. And as I said, find that go-to person that you know you can trust. Find that person that you know is going to give you good advice, and rely on that advice.
That's, by the way, Keith, that's great. I agree with you. And what's your thoughts on that, Russ, being 50 and entering the profession?
Well, you know, there's really no age limit anymore. I feel, you know, I'm here. I turned 56 2 days ago, and I'm not in the field anymore, but I feel like I could be back in it tomorrow and stuff. It's a matter of, you know, having your mindset up here right, because so much of this profession happens between our ears. It really does. There's another portion of it, though, that really is about the physicality of the job. So if you can pull those two things off, it's not a problem starting this late. And like Keith says too, you'll have an advantage. Inmates tend to see the fresh faces straight from the academy as fresh meat, someone to mess with. You know, I think that you'll have less of that being older, because you will have that life experience, and you probably up to this point probably developed some good communication skills. The younger guys don't always have that. I know I didn't when I first started. That was something that I really had to work on, because what had I seen up to that point in my life and career? So it's really about that I feel. I feel that you will have an advantage starting this late, and I feel that you'll be able to bring some of that life experience to the job and be able to, you know, make an impact. But it's going to be a steep learning curve for you too. So man, stick with that. Stick with your physical workouts and keep your mind sharp, and you're going to be just fine, I feel.
And if I can add, Russ, I like what you said. There's a balance between the physical and the mental mindset. And I know that there's a lot of young individuals in this field that are physically in shape, but they don't know how to communicate. They're impulsive. They look to kind of jump the gun, and they wind up posing a serious risk to the facility. So I think, yeah, there's that balance of the physical, yes, but let's not underestimate the importance of having that experienced mindset in regards to dealing with people and trying to be a little bit more patient. Because don't get me wrong, if the inmates are quick to see that you're ready to jump the gun every time they poke the bear, they're going to continue to poke the bear. So you have to just kind of sometimes just lay back and just kind of deal with be able to work through the emotions that kind of you get upset. But for someone that's new, they're going to be quick to jump the gun. I'm talking about someone that's young. They're going to be quick to jump the gun. And it turns out that you tend to be more of a threat than anything else. So I really do agree with these guys. Age is but a number. If you could physically do the job, because on another note, I know people in their 20s and 30s that can't run a mile and a half, you know, so it really is truly about the individual. I mean, I guess that's the gist of it all, you know, what you're able to handle and what you're able to provide. Now, there's another good question that comes from, I just saw it. You got to realize something. These comments keep moving, so I lose the comment when we're chatting. By the way, we have 20 people sitting in the room, which is great. Let me just see, because I just had, I think it came from, wait, give me a second, guys. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to. Hey, real quick on a side note, Lewis H asked if Russ, do you carry a baton at your joint, or did you carry a baton at your joint?
Yes, when I first started all those many years ago in 1989, Back then, we carried what was known as the PR-24, which is basically your side handle baton in the 24-inch extension model, but or not extension, but 24 inches overall total length. Then back about, I want to say, I think it was about 2004, maybe 2005, we switched over to the Monadnock expandable baton, which it's a baton that opens up as you deploy it. And so the PR-24 was a really great tool, but to really get your licks in with it, it was sort of a two-handed affair. The Monadnock expandable, I feel, gives you a chance to be able to have an OC in one hand and edit in another. And I think it's a little more versatile, in my opinion. I think that for knockdown power and fight ending ability, probably the PR-24 has it. But I mean, if I were going to go back tomorrow, though, I'd pick the Monadnock every time. So, yeah, and love the cross draw on it, because the cross draw on it means that you can get to it with either hand. It doesn't matter. The PR-24 was much more difficult to have that setup. So,
and I got to add something. Russ was carrying a baton back in 1989, and there's still a lot of states and facilities that don't even give their officers that. Now, I'm going to say, if you have a baton, you should always have an officer kind of watching that other officer's back. I always say that weapon, backing up another weapon. But speaking of batons, you know what's funny? When you have a code, I know a lot of officers, especially good officers, want to run an assist, and it could become hard for the sergeant to try to get a team in place. So a lot of facilities actually have marks on the baton. So if you wear this color baton, you're part of the first response. So if the first response comes running in, then you should have this color. And then the next response could have another color. This way, you're not scrambling to get somebody. You already know that, hey, you got this baton. You're going to be the first responder today. And the sad thing is sometimes you'll see officers not want that baton. That's a good test to see who has heart. But with that said, sometimes it's good to have those batons to have that little mark. So I know if I give you this baton with the blue, you're the first response today. And then you are. So anybody with a blue baton, if there's a code, I don't have to worry about getting people together. You're going to be there automatically. But again, that's if the officers already have those batons and they're carrying on their person, as opposed to having to get it from the team. But each baton kind of had a color, and it would let you know that this is the first response, and then the other color would be the second response. And the sergeant didn't have to worry about forming a team. He would just have to, or she would just have to report to the area, and that team would be there. Now, Keith, I'll give you this question first. It's a great question. It comes from Joseph Oliver. Would you say that correctional officers count as first responders?
I have to look at that in two areas. On the street, to be honest with you, I do not count correctional officers as first responders. As a police officer, I count firemen as secondary responders, because police officers are often there first. Now, in the event of a civil disobedience or something, I know there have been situations where we had college riots a few years ago, and they did use correctional officers as first responders at that. Unfortunately, too often correctional officers are disregarded and not considered first responders. In an institution, yeah, you're definitely a first responder. As Anthony was saying, there's designated first responders, there's designated secondary responders. Now, we didn't do it that way in Wisconsin with batons. Officers don't carry batons, but we had positions that were designated as first responders. We had positions that were designated as second responders. It's not something that correctional officers like to hear, but I don't think the general public perceives them as first responders. And I guess if you look at the true definition of it, they aren't first responders outside of a prison setting.
And I think, Keith, that's actually well said. But I do believe within our community, we are those first responders. Just like maybe if you're out on the streets and you work in one town, you're not really going to be a first responder for the other town unless, you just happen to jump on that scene. But don't forget, if there is an issue, the states that deem you as law enforcement, if you're in that vicinity, they do expect you to respond. So you are trained to be that level of first response. But the concern here is they don't want you responding and affecting what's happening in a negative way. So again, there's a role that you have to play. But again, if you're given that power of law enforcement, then you are trained to respond. And then once local PD come by or whatever it is, the scene goes to them, and then you just become a witness and do whatever it is that you have to write. Now, as for the prison,
Anthony, if I could add a little bit on that.
yeah, of course.
When I worked for the sheriff's department, I was working a special event. In this special event, there was a lot of drinking, things of that nature going on. Well, at the event, there was about 10 or 12 of my officers. I was first shift captain at the time, and I worked as for the sheriff's department part-time. Well, there was an individual at the bar who decided he didn't like me, and he just wanted to fight or whatever. And I ended up on the ground with him. And this was in the middle of a big crowd. And I'll tell you, one of the best feelings I ever had was when I looked up and I saw all my guys from the prison formed a semicircle around the area I was in and had their backs to me, watching the crowd, making sure that the crowd wasn't interfering. So yeah, those guys were first responders, and I'm glad that they were there. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's like just playing your role in the environment that you're meant to play that role in. So I will say, yes, of course, we are first responders in the prison setting, and we respond to everything from medical, mental health, protection, safety, and security. We run the gamut. Now, again, if you're out in the community and you're given that law enforcement status or that peace officer status, you are expected to respond and react. But again, not to a point where it interferes with the daily runnings of what that police department or state agency must do. No different than we wouldn't expect a police officer to come into our facilities and respond to our codes. These are things that we should handle on our own. It's sad to say that in some states they're so understaffed that they wind up having to get help from these outside agencies. But the key is the people that can handle the work behind the wall the best, that understand it the best, are the people that work behind that wall. Because there's a difference to the work that goes on inside and how you deal with a situation, as opposed to the work that needs to be done on the outside when dealing with a situation. So yeah, I would definitely consider us first responders. I definitely think how we handle something inside the prison can really carry itself really effectively on the outside. But I don't want to promote the fact that, hey, just jump on things on the outside, because I don't want us interfering with what the police may be trying to do. Just like 100%, I don't want them interfering with what we have to do, because that's our world and this is your world. What's your thoughts on that, Russ, with the first responder?
Well, it's first responder is really just, a definition, and some people have different ideas about exactly what that means. With my department, or both departments that I worked for, we had mutual aid agreements with all kinds of different law enforcement. Now, those rarely came into play, especially at the level of your average line staff officer. But there were times, especially when we had some fires going in California and stuff, sometimes our CERT team would get deployed to help with security situations with regard to those. And there were any number of times where our CERT team would also be deployed, and also our negotiations management team for barricaded suspects or any other thing that had to do with having a tactical team. And so they would go out on these things, because we had snipers and entry teams and negotiations management. So they tended to do the first responder thing. So we could have been capped at any time, but for whatever reason, it just didn't seem like that would come into play very often. But that only has to do with the outside world. On the inside world, we're all we ever see with regard to response. I never saw a sheriff showing up to be a second line responder, So I made it to just about every event as a first responder, the very first one there. So I just think it's kind of a definition that it's a little bit amorphous at times.
Now, Russ, I got a question for you first. This may fall into your forte, and then Keith, I'm very curious about your response, but this comes from Kendall Serta. Reading the yard, what types of groupings do you usually see on the yard? From communication among inmates to things about to hit the fan, also the eeriness of feeling the tension on the yard. Now, before Russ answers this question, I do want to say one thing. I know some people prefer to have their officers walking in that yard. because that's an old school thing. And there's, you know, they believe that presence does deter. I'm kind of into the new look of that. Again, not to negate people wanting to have that presence, same thing as the mess hall. But I also feel at this day and age, that's where we're the most vulnerable. I believe we're dealing with a different set of inmates as it was back in the day compared to what it is now. And I really do feel with the technology we have, but don't get me wrong, the technology does not eliminate that needed response team. I'm not saying that, because don't get me wrong, the same people that can walk the yard could also watch it from a safe distance. And when shit hits the fan, they're able to respond more effectively. But technology, stuff like that, I think that can really help us out with really being so vulnerable and placing 5 or 6 individuals, 5 or 6 custody members in a yard filled with hundreds of inmates, or in a mess hall filled with hundreds of inmates. But again, that's my perspective, because I feel that the inmate population has changed. They're not as respectful as they used to be, especially with people pushing the outside left agenda, where we're just kind of guards who are just go around beating up inmates all day. And now people, it's weird, but they believe that, when that's obviously not true. But Russ, you've supervised a lot of yards. I mean, Kendall's question is a great question about reading the yard. You know, what type of groupings do you look for? The feeling, the airiness. How do you check the temperature of a yard?
Well, the first thing that comes into play is knowing the yard well enough to know when something is off kilter, you know. And there's a lot of different things that'll indicate that. You know, the different groups, the different STGs, they tend to break the yard down into their own sections. So there'll be a section where the Crips hang out and the Crips do their exercising, and the Bloods might be in a little different area, and the white guys are hanging out in a slightly different area. And the thing that you tend to look for is, first of all, is if any particular group or number of groups has done what we call a mandatory yard, where everybody is coming out for some reason. And that tends to get picked up on pretty quick, because we just see, oh man, what's going on? All of a sudden, man, we have 2, 3, 4 times the number of white guys, for instance, that then would usually come out to yard. Also, you want to start looking for, just to take the temperature, is to see where everybody on that yard is looking. Are people stopping in the middle of their workouts? How many people do they have posted? Because you'll see if guys are working out, guys from their own ethnicity or from their own STG will be posted there to keep them safe. When that suddenly changes, anything that changes in that yard, it's a sudden clue that something's probably about to happen. Now, sometimes things will resolve themselves. Sometimes people just aren't quite sure what's going on. And you'll see the temperature go up and the temperature come down and up and down. And sometimes it'll just level off. But those are the key things, you know, is knowing what the yard is supposed to look like.
What's your thoughts on that, Keith?
I agree, that is a key thing, knowing what the yard's supposed to look like. You know, other clues, if you've got someone who during the course of their incarceration has never missed a rec period, and all of a sudden they're not going out there, that's a pretty good indication that there may be something going on, that they're staying in for a reason. If it's 90 degrees outside and you see guys coming out wearing bulky clothes, that's a good indication there may be something going on. You know, in Wisconsin, we still do have officers out on the yard. The institution I worked at, the Dodge Correctional Institution, we controlled inmate movement, and we didn't let hundreds of inmates out at the same time. We let certain units out at the same time. So there were people that lived in the same units. And as far as the gang affiliations, you're never going to stop people from affiliating with their gang. You're never going to divide them up racially, ethnically, whatever. That's going to happen, that there is going to be that mixture out there. The thing is to keep an eye on it. Now, unlike Anthony, I think officers walking the yard are a valuable resource, because they hear a lot of things. I walked the yard a lot too when I was a sergeant. And I'll tell you what, I picked up a lot of tips just passing by in casual conversation when people were talking and they didn't see you coming, they weren't aware that you could hear them or whatever. There's a definite benefit to having people on the yard. Now, I understand the safety that modern technology offers us, but the intelligent aspect and the things that can be gained from an officer simply walking the yard or standing in the dining hall. I know we had officers that were assigned the dining hall. There are generally 6 or 7 officers down there, as well as a supervisor. And one of the things we did that was unique, though, is inmates didn't get to sit where they wanted. They sat according to where we put them. So if we had someone that we knew was an agitator, we had a table, they called it the naughty table. That was the table right in front of the officer's desk, and that's where those people sat. Now, they didn't appreciate it, but if they were going to raise hell, we knew about it, and that's where they went. You try to control them, you try to keep the numbers manageable. But I think officers in the yard and officers in the chow hall or whatever having direct contact, yeah, it's dangerous. The whole job of corrections is dangerous, but I think it's pretty valuable as far as gathering intelligence.
Yeah, and actually, Keith, I do understand both perspectives. So I do understand the importance of having someone on that floor. Don't get me wrong, or someone walking the yard. But I figure now with the different type of inmates that we have, it becomes very vulnerable now for that officer when we have other ways to watch and supervise that yard. And also, what's great is that when you have the cameras on them, the inmates don't know where you're focused, especially have really good high-end digital cameras. So they don't know where your eyes are at any time. And it's good things to you could be focused on this group and they don't know that, and they're doing foolish things because they don't know the camera has zoomed in tight on whatever it is that they're exchanging, let's say contraband or whatnot. But definitely have that presence has a more immediate response if there is a need for that immediate response. So it kind of goes both ways. I think this could be a great dialogue in itself, because I would love to see what other people would think of that. And I can even post, we have over 20 people in this room right now. I mean, why not ask the question? Do you think that it's good to have the officers in the yard, hit a Y for yes? Or do you think with the equipment we have now, it's better that we keep the officers at a distance for safety reasons, and then if need be, they could be deployed? But either way, I understand both perspectives. I really do. So I'm just curious to see what you guys think. Next question comes from Chaos. I'll go to Keith first. In regards to field training officers, which do you feel is more important, experience or personality? What I mean is having years in corrections is more important than being positive and having good interpersonal skills. Now, real quick, Keith, before you answer it, I just like to let people know it's a balance of both. You need the experience, but you need people that believe in this profession and believe what it's about, and you need them to reinforce that to the people that are new, because if you set these people coming in with a negative mindset, we're not going to keep them. And if I find out that I had field training officers that were doing that, then they don't keep the job. I don't care how much experience they have. I need that balance. I need the experience coupled with the positive mindset, because again, you need to have people that want to be in this profession. What's your thoughts on that, Keith?
I agree 100%. Experience is great. I know a lot of experienced officers that come into work every day looking like they just took a bite out of a turd. They're mad at the world. They don't like their job, whatever. They may have a great deal of knowledge, but they're not going to give you that knowledge in any meaningful manner. Our field training officers, when I was still working, were generally people who had a minimum 3 to 5 years experience. Attitude is very important. They had to portray a positive attitude. They could talk about the negatives. There are negatives working in corrections. Who likes working on holidays? Who likes working on their kids' birthdays? Who likes working on Christmas, things like that? They could convey their feelings about the negatives, but not focus on the negatives. Their job as a field training officer is to train the people how to be an effective officer. If you're going to be an officer who's dissatisfied with your job, how effective are you going to be? If that's your main concentration, your main area of concern is how miserable you have it because of understaffing, low pay, too much overtime, all this other stuff, that's a reality in corrections. But if you make that your main focus, you're going to have a miserable career. So a field training officer needs to be able to convey a sense of satisfaction. They need to be able to convey a sense of accomplishment. And yeah, they need some experience, undoubtedly they need experience. They need to be able to train you. They need to know what to train you in and how to train you. And they need to be a resource. If you've got a good field training officer, that's your go-to guy. That's who you can go to even after your off-field training. That's who you can go to because that's who, as supervisors, we depended on to be our go-to guy in a lot of situations.
Hey, by the way, thank you. I agree with you 100%, Keith, on that. I believe that, again, it is all about, you do need that experience, but you also have to have someone that still, after all those years, think positive about the profession because they're the first contact with those trainees that are coming in. And I really like to have my trainees believe in what they do. I don't want them disenfranchised from day one. Russ, what's your thoughts on FTO's experience, personality?
Well, you're right. There has to be a balance there. You know, that FTO has to be able to convey the training and the experience to the officer. If he's got no personality and he's dry and he doesn't know how to explain things, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to stick with that officer. And so there definitely has to be a balance. You know, when I would go in, we never adopted the FTO model until about the time that I left CDCR. But when I would train people, man, I'd like to take them under my wing and talk about what I was seeing and show them different things and some tips and some tricks and enjoy it and make it a thing where it was a fun learning experience for them. And so you've got to have the personality to be able to do that. And if you don't have it, you probably shouldn't have been accepted as an FTO. But you have to be able to bring both parts to the table. Otherwise, it's not a meal.
Yeah, guys, FTO is a real balanced position. I mean, if you have a disgruntled worker as your field training officer, it's going to be like a cancer, in my opinion. And it's just going to just reinforce negativity. And then you get people coming right in who may have wanted to be in this profession since day one, who now no longer want to be in this profession, especially because that initial impact is the most important impact you'll have when you enter this profession. That initial impact is extremely powerful. Great question, by the way. The next question comes from a gentleman from, I think it's a gentleman from Canada called Blues Little. He's happy we're doing another live stream, or she's happy we're doing another live stream. And it goes, what kind of facility would be best for a new fish to start in? I'm looking at a medium security, max, and a pre-trial facility, all in Canada. So let me just answer first, and then we'll go to Russ and then Keith. If your agency has all levels that are being offered, from highest level of restriction to lowest level, I always agree you should start at the highest level, get yourself that strong sense of security. And then if need be, if you decide to move forward, then if there's other levels, at least you always have that good foundation of working at the highest level of security. Because as I said, you don't want to go from something low and then, you know, not realizing that how complacent you may be in regards to working at a higher level when, as I said, the best foundation for me is having someone put in a closed area, highest restrictions, and really let them learn some top security methods. And again, let them be partnered with people with experience who want to teach them. That's the balance. You know, so you get an officer that wants to learn, if they have a chance to work in a max facility first, partner with people with experience who know how to run a tight ship. That's great learning, and that's learning that could be applied on all levels of corrections, prison, jail. You do it the opposite way, that's going to be a little bit different, and it's not going to be as easy to learn that next level of restriction. Russ, what's your thoughts on that, Russ? Do you believe that, actually, I think Russ may have went off camera for a second. Oh, there you go. You coming back, Russ?
I had to let the dog out, man.
Oh, sorry. So, Russ, what's your thoughts on our friend from Canada? What kind of facility would be best for a new fish to start in?
Well, you know, typically when you start in a facility, a lot of times you're by yourself to a degree throughout the day. Sometimes you'll have a partner that'll come through and you'll do a count or a security check or something like that. And so a wide open situation where you've got inmates with all kinds of competing needs and wants and figuring out how they can manipulate it is not so good. So sometimes some of those higher security buildings like a SHU or an ADSEG is a good place to start, because what happens is you have a lot of officers in there and you can rely on them to, hopefully you can rely on them to show you the right way, to show you the right thing. And you start out with, interactions where generally you're only talking or dealing with one or two inmates at a time, and you're not swamped. Your resources inside your head aren't swamped by all those people wanting attention, and you having to deal with them and figure out, whether you're being led astray, or they're trying to set you up, or they're trying to get your attention. So an assault or a stabbing can go, on over in some other part. So I think it's helpful if you start in a building with a little, higher security level, and then work your way out to where the fun stuff happens, which is, general population yards, whether that's minimum, medium, or max. All of them are quite interesting to work. And for me, I never liked much, working the shoe or working that, because it was, it tended to be kind of broke, but it did set the tone for you understanding the gravity of the environment that you're working in.
That's a great answer, Russ. And Keith, you being a captain and you working at all levels of security, where would you like to see your new recruits start off first?
I almost have to disagree to a certain extent. In Wisconsin in particular, in maximum security institutions, the officers don't have the direct contact with the inmates as much as they do in perhaps a medium security institution. Now, when I was a sergeant at a medium security institution, it was direct supervision. I was on a housing unit by myself with up to 60 inmates. And believe me, I had to learn how to talk to those inmates. Unfortunately, a lot of times when people start out in a higher level of security, they really don't have to talk to the inmates that much, because there's the door between them. There's always that physical barrier between them. So for me, I found that a lot of the officers that are really effective at communicating with inmates are officers who started in a minimum or a medium facility, where they've had to have direct contact with the inmates, where it's face-to-face contact. It's not talking to them behind steel bars or behind a door or whatever. So, I guess it's all just a matter of perspective. You can learn to be a good officer regardless of what custody level you start at. I started at a medium security. I promoted to captain. I quit corrections. I worked in the sheriff's department for a few years, and I retired from there and got bored and went back and was a captain in a maximum security institution. Now, could I see the differences between people who'd spent their career working a max as opposed to those who come from minimums or medium? Yeah, I could, because I felt the communication skills of the people that had worked in mediums or minimum securities was a little bit better, because they knew how to deal with the inmates on a one-to-one basis, on a basis of being more than just I'm the officer, you're the inmate. There was almost a little more respect there, because they knew how to talk to inmates better. That's just from my perspective, and that's just what I've observed.
Well, I will tell you one thing, Keith, that's a hard perspective to argue against, because I didn't think about it like that. So I'm actually going to put another poll on my board, because I just did one now, and I'll put the other one tomorrow. I did one on my community board just now about walking the mess halls, because, again, I agree with your perspective as well. I'm just curious to see where it is, because it can go either way. Just what you just said, too, that perspective about communication. Communication is very important. So again, you got safety and security. Communication runs in line with safety and security, but I was more concerned about the practices of safety and security. But then again, learning to communicate with inmates is extremely important. So again, with corrections, there's so much learning that's happening at once that maybe if there's a way to kind of partner with what Keith's saying, is by when the person's training, you give them that diverse training. So, again, we're not looking at keeping people in those areas for months on end. Maybe the first week you get a taste of what it's like to work in the max. Maybe the next week you get a taste of what it's like to work in a less restrictive setting. This way you can kind of get a balance of what's being offered. So in that case there, if it's just to create a balance, then 100%, if you want to check out the safety and security one week and then communication the next. But because there's so much being offered in corrections, it really could go either way. So Keith, you're right, that communication is key. I always stress that. What environment do I think is best to get that communication? But I also feel that if you start in that more safe and secured environment, it provides you the environment where that communication is controlled, yes, but controlled for a reason. So now when you go to that lesser environment, the least restrictive environment, you kind of have that sense of where that communication needs to go in regards to that level of just dialogue that you're having with that inmate. I really do think that sometimes the environment also reminds us of our purpose. A lot of people, inmates, when they look to manipulate, they look to manipulate that personal information and try to put you in a situation where you forget you're working in a prison. And a mindset does matter to me. So I feel that when you're in that more restrictive environment, you can't help but reminded of where you work because the doors are slamming, everything in front of you is restricted. But, again, I think that's a great perspective. I think that could be a dialogue that we can have in the future, Russ. We could talk about the mess yard, the mess and yard, and we could also talk about where we feel, like in this gentleman here from Canada, he actually has to pick a facility. So when you're picking a facility, you're going to be there in a longer term. If you're training, well, training may be different. 1 week you do here, 1 week you do here. But if you're looking to start in a facility and be there for a long time, where would you best start? Again, I'll stick with the safety and security. Communication is key. Thank you for bringing that perspective. I never thought about that before. Russ, we got to have that dialogue soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got another question now. This comes from Sarah Wallace. What would you recommend for an older female rookie who has barely any self-defense training and lives in a rural area? Is there any good YouTube channels for that? So again, real quick question. What would you recommend for an older female rookie who has barely any self-defense training and lives in a rural area? Okay, so first off, I'll run over a couple of things real quick, and then I'll forward it over to Keith first, then Russ. One thing is, if you're a member of social media, get into some of those secured groups like Correctional Officer Brotherhood, Keepers of Chaos, Thin Silver Line. Also become a member of the Tier Talk page because we're giving out a lot of information, but we also have group discussions. We talk about concerns that are trending in the field and have a lot of knowledge of what's going on in other states. Don't just look at your stuff. Kind of give yourself a very good field of knowledge. Because obviously what happens in one state can easily happen in your state. As for YouTube channels, I have one called Tier Talk. We're on it now. Russ got Cops and Corrections. Gary York has True Prison Stories, I believe. Kind of changes once in a while. I forget.
I'm the one that has Cops Corrections, Anthony.
Yeah, no, I said Keith Helwig has Cop Corrections. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's listen to that again. Keith Helwig has Cop Corrections. Russ runs the Keepers of Chaos page. Actually, Keith also runs the Correctional Officer Brotherhood page. And Gary York has True Prison Stories. But when you mention what would you recommend for an older female rookie, let's not worry about, we talked about the age before. Let's just get rid of the older female rookie. Let's just talk about maybe just being a rookie in general. Because I would even go as far as eliminating the gender aspect of it all too. The advice that I would give an older female rookie, the advice I would give an older male rookie, the advice I would give a male rookie, female rookie, a lot of it's going to run parallel regardless of gender or age. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
The main thing really is just to get started doing something. The first thing that I would pay attention to is being in good physical shape. But then when we start talking about actual defensive tactics, there's two versions of that I don't think you can beat out there. And one, of course, is the go-to that everyone is going to say when we talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because you always end up on the ground. But then there's another lesser one known, and it's harder to find but if you can get anything to do with like Wally J's small circle jiu-jitsu, which is a lot of finger locks and wrist locks and things that we use all the time with regards to putting guys into handcuffs or into restraints, or once you get them on the ground, being able to put them in a pain compliance, pressure compliance. Wally J's small circle jiu-jitsu is great too. So either of those two or both, if you can. But if you could only focus on one, I would prefer you focus on just overall strength and flexibility and build your body.
Well said, Russ. I kind of stuck with the channels, but I knew you were going to come in with that info. That's where you're more, you have that way over me. What's your thoughts on that, Keith?
Well, I know that probably 90% of the people who come into corrections as a correctional officer, and the same with police officers, have probably never been in a knockdown drag-out fight their entire life. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and pick a fight so you have that experience, but the fact of the matter is most institutions, most states and facilities are going to provide you with some type of self-defense training. Now, in Wisconsin, we use POST, Principles of Subject Control, and it's more of a defensive measure. It's learning how to take an inmate down. It's learning how to take an inmate and come along holds, things of that nature. Now, you're going to learn that, and you have to follow those policies and procedures. You can't just use anything. I learned I had an FBI defense tactics course, and they taught me a move that I could break an arm in 3 places, you know, just by twisting it the right way, by grabbing it the right way. Okay, I know how to do that. Does that mean I'm going to use that in the prison? Not necessarily. But there again, if you're in a fight in a prison and you're fighting fair, you're doing it wrong. If you're in any fight and you're fighting fair, you're doing it wrong. You do what you have to survive. Now, you're going to have policies and procedures as far as escorts and things of that nature. You have to know when to use force. You have to know when to stop using force. You know, there's the old dictum that we always trained in Wisconsin is be nice until it's time not to be, then be nice again. You know, you just don't keep wailing on the guy once the fight's over. Once the fight's over, the fight's over. You're going to be getting some self-defense training at your academy. I would assume. I can't think of a state that wouldn't provide it. Just remember that you're not alone, that probably 90% of your classmates that are in there don't have any formal training. And if they do, you know, good for them. You know, it's nice that they do have that training, but don't feel you're any less than they are because you don't have that training. For one thing, you don't have any preconceived notions or bad habits to break, which is a really good thing from my perspective as someone who used to be an instructor.
Okay, great, great. And as I said, just outside the physical aspect, just to gain some experience, there's a lot of information out there now, especially through social media. So there's a lot more being offered than was in the past. So take advantage of what was recommended. The Correctional Officer Brotherhood, Keepers of Chaos, Thin Civil Line, very good groups on social media, very good interaction. The YouTube channel Tier Talks has created a pretty good community where we post up videos and we really have good dialogue, especially now. We'll probably wind up doing a video of the 2 issues that were presented that we kind of sit on either side with. And then you got Cops and Corrections with Keith Helwig, True Prison Stories. Just a lot of good information coming out there now, and needs to come out there, because if we're not getting it out there, the other side will. And the problem here is that we're going to be left behind. So, and by the way, too, having the community that we have, it's a very small community, which is a good thing because then we're able to get specifically to the needs. And eventually, as the community starts to branch out, we'll still have that secured, tight niche. You know, that's the key. And also, this is a very, very tight niche. That's another thing too. And what we need is more investment from those who watch the shows too, because unfortunately, we need to get our message outside of our circle. And it's hard for us to do that because the following for our side is going to be very limited. But unfortunately, our side is what's actually giving out the right information. So we wind up always being behind the 8 ball. You wind up having to convince people of the truth as opposed to telling them the truth. And that's what kind of hard about this profession, about, you know, just the fact that there's just more people more concerned about the other side, as opposed to realizing that you help us, it helps the population. Hey, Russ, this question will go to you. Austin Davis, we're going to do about 3 or 4 more questions, then we'll call it quits because I think it's going to be dinner time soon. But Austin Davis mentioned, what is the best brand of boots to buy? Socks, undershirts, etc. And do you prefer your officers to have a shaved face or some facial hair?
I don't know that Russ is with us anymore, Anthony.
I'll get him. I'll text him now.
Okay.
So were you able to, you got the question or no?
I got the question, and I guess if I were to answer that is, you know, as far as boots, wear what's comfortable for you. A lot of times in Wisconsin, we have to respond to emergencies on foot. So we have officers that wear black tennis shoes. Wear what's comfortable. Find something that fits you. Find something that you're comfortable with, whether you're on your feet for the entire shift, whether you just have to walk the cell block once in a while, or whether you're a sergeant who sits with your feet up on the desk. Find what's comfortable for you. As far as undergarments, you know, there's a lot of moisture gathering undergarments you can wear, things of that nature. Now, if you have to wear a vest, I can tell you as a cop, I have an external vest. It goes on the outside. It has my armor plates in it. It has my pockets in it, the whole works. For me, it's great. Particularly in Wisconsin in the summer, we can have days where it's 90 degrees and there's 100% humidity. So, I'll be honest with you, there's times I'm sitting in my squad car and I'm flapping that vest like a sophomore at spring break. It's just something you have to be comfortable. Anything you wear, take into account comfort. Now, you have to look professional as well. One of the things that I object to, I'm an old school guy. I've been doing this since 1977. They've gone away, in most cases, they've gone away from the Class A uniforms, and they've gone to BDUs, things of that nature. I've seen some guys where they come in with their BDUs and they look crisp, they look sharp. And don't think that because the inmates don't notice the way you look, that the inmates don't consider you as a professional based on the way you look. If you come in wearing a pair of pants and have more wrinkles than an old elephant's ass, and it looks like you slept in your shirt, inmates are going to notice that. I'm not saying you have to come in every day with starched pants and spit shine boots or whatever, but you should come in every day looking presentable. But there again, wear what's comfortable for you. You know what's comfortable for you. You know what fits for you. And as long as it falls within your department's guidelines and policies as far as your uniform attire, go with whatever's comfortable for you.
Yeah, now I don't know what happened with Russ. I think he's trying to connect, but if he may have troubles because, again, internet's not always good everywhere. So I thought we could do two last questions, if that's okay, Keith, before you go.
Sure.
So the one question I want to do real quick, I looked at it. There's a lot of questions left, but guys, we only have a chance for two, but we'll be doing another live stream again in the near future. We're going to start doing a lot more of these live streams. And by the way, when this live stream is done, it automatically posts. So if you like what we did, hit the like, because the more engagements we have, the more it boosts us in the algorithm for other people to see. But the one question I wanted to go with first, again, I only have two questions left, is do I believe, there it goes, from Joseph Oliver, do you all think we're successfully rehabilitating inmates, or is it just a waste of time and resources? Let me say something about this real quick, because being on the higher level, on the administrative level, and being in charge of programming, because again, starting in custody, now I'm in charge of programming, I do believe that we have people that are devoted to the mission, which is, yes, rehabilitation. I do believe it's needed because, again, most inmates are going to get released. So you want to prepare them to have that right mental mindset. Oh, we got Russ back. That right mental mindset, and at least behind the wall where it's safe, and then preparing for that reentry. The one thing here is that because I believe in the work that people are doing, I know there's a chance for success. I know that. I 100% agree with that because I believe in the people that are doing the work. But again, an inmate's going to want to have to change. They're going to want to have to change from an internal perspective. Like, I'm not changing because you're going to give me more commissary at the end of the month, or you're going to get me a better job. I'm changing because I know I need it. So I believe that the resources are good if you have someone coming in knowing that they need to change, knowing why they need to change, and not blaming anyone else for their issues, knowing that, yes, they have to address it within themselves first, then yes, I believe those changes can be facilitated. But with that said, you can't force people to change. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
Well, the last 3 years of my correctional career, I spent, rather than in CDCR, I was at a juvenile facility. And I got to say that we had a lot of very hopeless cases there, but not all of them were hopeless. And some of them turned out to be success stories. I think that the same thing goes for prison, but maybe to a lesser degree. There are some successes out there, and we should do what we can to build on those. Now, having said that, there is some line, and I'm not sure where it is, where beyond that, you're just throwing good money after bad. There's a point of diminishing return for a certain population of those inmates. Now, I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I know that rehabilitation is something that we're tasked with doing. The hard part these days is we tend to see some administrations and some state legislatures, judges, governors that want to run the rehabilitation without accountability. And that's one of the things that's happening in my home state of California right now. They just paroled a guy that was the Aryan Brotherhood, killed people while he was in prison, and now they're claiming that he's reformed. I don't know if that's a chance that you take or not. I know I wouldn't be comfortable with it, but regardless, rehabilitation is part of the mission, and we need to do what we can to facilitate that to whatever degree is right and correct. I just don't think that I'm smart enough to figure out what that particular line or boundary is.
And if I can add on to that, Russ, because you got me thinking now, safety and security has to exist with rehabilitation. It is a dance, it's a partnership. And again, it's a partnership that has to exist between the people doing the programming and the people that are providing safety and security. Safety and security obviously being paramount. I think it works when we're able to eliminate the threats to rehabilitation, which means that if you have an inmate that's problematic, they can't be hanging out in those units messing with the inmates who are programming, which means that, yes, there should be things like punitive segregation, because it does work well with rehabilitation in regards to taking that person out. A lot of people from the outside are only focused on that one individual, but we on the inside focus on the many. So the problem is you have to give an environment that's conducive to that programming. But even if you take that inmate out into another area, it doesn't mean they're forgotten. They get looked at more intensely, maybe on a one-on-one. But in the meantime, you still have to get to the masses. And I do believe if you get the inmate that wants to make that change, we definitely have staff that can help them through it. But again, a lot of the onus has to be on that inmate wanting to change. That's the key. They don't want to change. We don't have enough time to always convince them to do that. We have other inmates we have to get to. But if you come in and that's sincere and honest, then yes, I believe that you can have staff who believe in what they do, and then that is their purpose. That's why they entered the profession, and you'll see that their heart and soul will go into that inmate for rehabilitation. And trust and believe, guys, some of these staff members that invest their time in trying to help these individuals, they get very frustrated when those inmates start to fall back because they take it personal. Not to the point where they can easily be manipulated and want to get that inmate out of trouble, but the point is, I've invested this time in you, and now you're going back to these impulsive choices. So again, there really is a working partnership, but yes, I do believe people can change, obviously for the right reasons, but also because I believe in the work that people do behind that wall. So I don't want to be that kind of person that says I don't believe people can change, because then what's that saying about the people who are doing their work? They're saying it's fruitless, and I don't think that's the case. I believe that if you get the right person who wants to change, we have the staff that can accommodate that. Now, this will be the last question for the day, guys, and then we'll try to plan another dialogue. We've been on for about an hour and a half. We lost Keith, but I believe Keith gave us some very good dialogue, so thanks for coming back.
I see him.
Oh, how come I don't see Keith?
I don't know. Trust me, he's there though.
Oh, I don't see him. Okay, Keith, did you get a chance to answer the rehabilitation question yet?
No, I didn't, but you know what? I agree a lot with what you said. It has to be a personal choice for the inmate to want to be rehabilitated, to want to change their ways. I can think of several examples right off the top of my head. We have a man in town here who runs one of the most successful auto repair dealerships who served time. When I wrote my first book, I noticed a Hispanic man looking at it, and he had the teardrops down his side, the whole works. And I talked to him, and his name was Roy. And first thing I asked him was, "Where'd you do time?" And he told me he spent 20 years in Joliet because of a crime. Well, later on, I was talking to him, and I said, "Well, what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I murdered somebody." And I said, "No, I didn't ask you what you did. I asked you what you do now." Well, what he does now is he's an entrepreneur. He's a youth pastor at his church. He runs an outreach program for youth. He has his own business. The guy's a success because he wanted to be a success. I think that's one of the things we need to stress to people is rehabilitation is not a farce. Those people that are working in the rehabilitative aspects are doing a job, and they're doing an earnest job. But the inmate has to want to change before there's going to be a change.
I'm actually very happy that we agreed on something, Keith.
Well, once in a while, even a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Oh my God. Okay, so I don't know, is Russ, just real quick, are you still here now?
I am still here.
Oh, okay, so my screen, okay. All right, and then just one more test because we have one last question yet, and it's a very important question. So, Keith, you're still here, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so this last question is going to come from Juan Rodriguez. He says that the channel provides great information. Thank you, Juan. I appreciate the information comes from the community as well as my guests. So I'm only as good as the community and my guest. Because believe it or not, a lot of the stuff I say, I'm just BSing my way through it. But it seems to hit some points. I just keep on throwing shit at a dartboard until I get something right. But this is the question from Juan. I have a pre-background interview tomorrow here in California. Do you guys have any last minute tips or advice? So Keith, you want to hit this one up first?
I used to be on the interview panel when I worked for the Sheriff's Department. I also did interviews for the Department of Corrections. When you go into that interview, assume that they know everything that you've ever done wrong. I've been in situations where we rejected more than one candidate who gave great interviews, and we would always follow up with the question, is there anything that you haven't told us you think we should know? And the reason we're asking that question is because we already know what you haven't told us. So the best piece of advice I can give you is be honest. You know, if you smoked a little pot when you're in college, tell them that. If you got a speeding ticket, tell them that. Don't try to hide anything. Don't try to cover up anything. Be honest, be forthright, show yourself as a person of integrity.
Well said, Keith. I couldn't agree more. And Russ, what's your thoughts on that pre-background check?
You know, I think that you go into it and like Keith said, to be honest, but realize that this is the only chance that you have to sell yourself, right? So figure out what your best attributes are and think about real world applications that might apply to something that goes on inside the prison. You know, and that's hard to do with stuff that's out in the real world. But if you had a job before where you were a team leader, talk about that experience and about how you think that might apply to something inside, and give them examples of things you've done and things that you've accomplished, right? And just, you know, try and really showcase what you have to give to the department, because really, you know, sometimes they just seem like they're just doing nothing but hiring bodies, but you want to stand out even from those bodies. You want to be the one where they go, hey, I think this guy's got something to offer. I think he may be an up and comer. This is the kind of guy I would like to see promote. They may not say that out loud, but you want them thinking that in their head. So think about those things that you can showcase that happened to you in real life that might in some way, even if you're not sure how it would, that would translate over into the correctional realm.
Right. And I just want to say there's a very good comment here from Gary T. Be proud, sell yourself. Don't be humble. You know, guys, I'm going to tell you something. I've been on the panel a few times as well. Not so much for the officer's perspective, but, you know, civilian staff. They kind of go through not as tight, but definitely a routine as well. I'm going to partner with exactly what they're saying. Be honest. All because they asked a question don't mean they don't know the answer. They do. They're testing you. Be truthful. Be consistent, because with truth comes consistency. If you're lying, you're going to exhaust yourself. I'll tell you that right now, because you're going to lie on top of lie on top of lie. I remember an issue where there was an officer from a county facility that was interviewing for IA. Let me just tell you this story real quick. So IA is internal affairs. They're the investigative division. That's what they do. So when he was interviewing, he came late. And they said, well, why were you late? And he said, I'm sorry, man, I had a flat tire. I had to change the tire. So, okay, hey, not a problem. So they run through the interview. When the interview was done, the investigator had said, hey, can I see inside your trunk the flat tire that you changed? And he didn't. He didn't have a flat tire in the trunk. So he got caught with a lie, and he never got the position. So again, sometimes it's best just to be truthful. And if something happens, you just got to let the chips fall where they may. Don't anticipate where the chips are going to fall. And don't try to place them yourself. Let them do that. Because the moment you get too involved in that, the moment you start worrying too much of where it's going to fall, you're going to start being dishonest. You're going to be hesitant with your answers. You got to let the answers come out. And at the end of the day, being truthful, like both gentlemen said here, that's the best bet. That's it. So, guys, any closing thoughts? Russ, any closing thoughts for our Tier Talk audience?
Just that I'm enthused with where Tier Talk has been. I'm even more enthused as to where it's headed. And I'm just, happy to lend my 2 cents worth to anyone who wants to listen. And I just want to thank you for giving me a chance to be able to do that, Anthony.
We've been doing this for quite a while, Russ. Plus, there's a lot of topics that you cover that I can't even touch. So I benefit a lot from it as well, Russ. Don't think I don't. So you're an expert in the field. I recognize that since day one, since we communicated on that great group, Correctional Brotherhood. That's where we first met, which is probably over 60,000 strong. I'm sure Keith could talk about that group a little bit more. And don't forget Keepers of Chaos. Russ Hamilton runs that group himself. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. There's impacts in this profession just on so many platforms now. So if you get a chance, join some of these platforms, take part in the conversation. And I'm telling you something, guys, the next step is to take these groups, to take a community like Tier Talk and find a way where we all can meet up. That's the key. This isn't just about being a family in social media. This is about, okay, we've established that we're a family in social media. So when do we meet our brothers and sisters? That's the key. When people start seeing our numbers beyond the pages, they start seeing that we have events and this is the amount of people that are coming. I'm going to tell you something, guys. People will take that seriously. And that's always been the key. It's always been having our voices heard, not having my voice heard, not having Russ, not having Keith, our voices. So it's about time we put ourselves in situations where we're allowed to do that. And that's why Tier Talk has a platform like this. If you want to come in and discuss, you can always come in. If you felt today that you had something you wanted to say, all you had to do was message me. I would give you the number to come into the room and then you could say it. And then we could always have a good discussion. Like me and Keith, we weren't prepared for what we were going to say. And Keith has his perspective. I have mine. But each perspective has value because we're experienced in the field. So we have a reason why we have that perspective, because it's experience. And the next discussion we may have, as well as the other ones, is officers carrying Narcan. I don't want to forget about that. Hey, Keith, any closing comment?
It's nice to be a part of a group that enhances our profession. It's a profession that does need to have a voice through pages on Facebook like Keepers of Chaos or the Correctional Officer Brotherhood, the Thin Silver Line, whatever. We're getting our voices heard through Anthony's program, Tier Talk. I could only hope that my page, whatever, or my channel on YouTube would have half the amount of people that Anthony has. If it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I'm still going to get information out there through Cops Corrections one way or another. I would just urge everybody that's out there, make your voices heard. Let people see you as professionals. Let them know that you're professionals and act as professionals.
And guys, if I may say something, the reason why we're so close is because we're not competing. We all have the same goal in mind. So however strong we've built our platforms, we allow the others to use it. Because I wish I could have a platform like Correctional Officer Brotherhood that's over 60,000 strong, Keith. So, it goes both ways. But the key here is this. It's not about being part of these platforms and not doing anything. You have to be engaged. For us, we do take the work home with us, and then we shoot the shit about the job. And, sometimes that's good, or sometimes people may not have the time. But when you join on these platforms, we look for people to engage in the community because that's what the platform's about. It's a two-way dialogue, not a one-way dialogue. So it's about, yes, being an active member in these communities and just speaking your concerns and trying to lead people into this profession, because a lot of people that follow Tier Talk are new people. They're new. They're either planning on entering the field or they're already in the field, but they have maybe a couple of weeks in or no more than a year. So the thing is, they're looking to us for advice. And I'm going to tell you something, guys, from the beginning, me, Russ, Keith, we know our main followers on this channel. We know the people that have been with us since day one. So we know the people that have continued to engage in our community to help it grow. That's always the key. And we look for those people when we go to these live chats. So as our numbers start to grow, we remember the people who were there from the beginning. That's the key in carrying us through. And we do remember the new people that discover us that seem to be now engaged. Because the more that you interact, the more we see your name, the more that you become an essential part to our community. And it doesn't even matter if we don't agree on every perspective. The point is where you're coming from. The fact that you have experience and that you're talking from the field has tremendous value. And there are times right now where people can turn my mind. Keith did today with the communication, very valuable. Now I got to figure out a way to how to partner that with my argument of having that safety and security first. But look at the value in what was said. This is what creates good dialogue. The fact that I may not agree with you, you may not agree with me, but Dan, you made a good point. So now I have to step it up a notch. Just like Keith may have to step it up a notch, just like Russ has to step it up a notch. But at the end of the day, look what we just did. We've evolved. We evolved. And that's the key. And people don't realize how much dialogue needs to get out there about this profession. They don't realize it. They don't. And that's what we bring it up here. And now eventually, guys, you're going to start seeing some more professional content that I'll be doing connected to another channel. And that's going to start probably coming out around once a month. They may be more of a professional production value, so maybe more easily shared to bring people from the outside in. But in the meantime, if you get a chance, share this stuff, get it out there, because ultimately it's going to bring people back to the community, and we look for that engagement because of what they have to offer. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell is going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe. Now I got to stop it, so hold on. Don't. Okay, I'm going to do it again. Stay safe and stop. All right, guys. So I thought that was good, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
I thought it went pretty good, Anthony.
Great.
I don't know if you guys could probably no longer see my face, but guys, what this does now, it's going to upload to YouTube directly now, so there's no edits or anything. So it's going to see me and Keith's fight.
Okay. Well, I gotta go because my wife's got dinner on the table.
All right, no, hey, it was good having you. We'll do it again soon. But mind you, if you want, we could have up to 10, 20. We could have many people in this room at once, so we could do another table round discussion one day.
Sure,
Awesome.
Sure.
All right, take
All
care,
right.
Keith.
All right, catch you guys later.
All right,
All
brother.
right.
Hey, Russ, that was a good dialogue, right?
Oh yeah, man. I thought we had a lot of good engagement. A lot of people asking questions. People even interacting with each other. In the room. So yeah, I was real pleased with it.
All right, the funny thing is, actually, we were still live. I didn't discontinue the live. Hold on. So I just realized that. Hold on, man.
I was going to tell you.
Wait, hold on.
I was
Wait,
glad
what
I
the
didn't
hell
start
did I do?
taking my shower.
All right, hold on. All right, love you guys again. I guess that's a goodbye. I thought I had stopped the video. Let me see. How do you, it's only stopping on the one side. What is going on with me? Oh, okay. There's a button that actually says stop live stream. So I'm just going to push it in the count of 3. 1, 2.